is Mia Topp and I welcome you to Tallinna Vesi's quarterly webinar. Today's webinar is hosted by the Chairman of the Board, Karl Brookes, and Chief Financial Officer Riina, who will introduce the performance of the first quarter of 2016. After the presentation, you have the opportunity to ask questions by writing them on the panel on the right corner. Also, if you face any technical problems, please don't hesitate to let us know by writing them on the same panel on the right corner. We will now start with the presentation, for which I will hand over the turn for Karl Brookes. Karl, you may go.
Thank you, Marilys. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining the Q1 2016 webinar today. Financial and operational performance for the first quarter of 2016 is off to an encouraging start, with the majority of our operational KPIs being achieved and a slight increase in profitability compared to the previous year brought about by increased revenues. So, moving on to the operational update, the quality of water supplied to our customers remains very high, with water quality for the first quarter of this year being at 100% amongst the 772 samples taken from across our network. The wastewater leaving the company's treatment plant at Baltic was also 100% compliant with the stipulated standards and no pollution incidents have occurred. Whilst the current level of leakage is higher than the comparative period last year, this is due to the colder ambient temperatures for this winter, which gave rise to a higher number of bursts in the water network. We remain optimistic about hitting the 15% internally set KPI by the year end, but it must also remember that this is a very challenging target that reflects the outstanding performance we had last year. Our work continues to repair the collector, the large sewer that we have at Streamy Beach. As mentioned in previous updates, this repair is technically challenging and must be done having regard to the adjacent infrastructure and maintaining supplies to approximately 100,000 people in Tallinn. The project is now entering a critical phase whereby we are now breaking out the damaged collector and replacing it with a new pipe. Current costs are within the original estimate of €6.7 billion. ASTV's major shareholder, United Utilities, continues to provide continuous technical support throughout this challenging project. So, moving on to the tariff dispute. Firstly, a reminder with respect to some of the background of the dispute. Tallinna Vesi has been in a local court with the dispute with the Competition Authority since 2011. The dispute arose because the Competition Authority has to date refused to approve the annual water tariff application submitted by the company, which is contrary to the terms of the original services agreement that was signed back in 2001 when the company was first privatised. So as you will recall, we are fighting the dispute on two legal fronts. So first of all, the local court case in Estonia. So on the 5th of June 2015, the Tallinn Administrative Court made their decision and dismissed ASTV's claim. Tallinn Administrative Court released the reasoning of the dismissal of the claim back on the 12th of October 2015. The Administrative Court was of the opinion that the tariff part of the services agreement, which in itself has been deemed a public law contract by the Estonian courts back in 2012, is not binding on the Competition Authority. Tallinna Vesi has filed an appeal to the District Court on the 11th of November last year, but we are still awaiting the date of the hearing in 2016. So the other legal route, oh sorry, I just need to mention something very important. So whilst that local court case is continuing, we do have an injunction in place which keeps the tariffs frozen at their 2010 levels. So in parallel with the local court dispute, the international arbitration proceedings are also ongoing, and that's being held via ICSID, which is the International Centre for the Settlement of Investment Disputes. So, after years of trying to negotiate a solution, the Supervisory Council of Tallinna Vesi decided to commence international arbitration proceedings against the Republic of Estonia for breach of the bilateral investment treaty between the Netherlands and the Republic of Estonia. On the 17th of June 2015, the timetable of the international arbitration proceedings was determined, with the final hearing set for November of this year, 2016. and remember that this hearing will actually be webcast live on the internet when it's in progress. Timetable and further details on the case can be found on the ICSID website, and the link is already included in some of the previous investor announcements that we've uploaded to the site. The process remains ongoing and we have no updates for this webinar, but of course we'll keep you updated of any developments as and when they may materialise. So just in summary, and as stated on numerous occasions previously, we do and are open for a negotiated settlement, but so far these discussions have not been forthcoming. I'm now going to hand you on to Riina, who will talk to you in detail about the Q1 financial results. Thank you.
Thank you, Karl, and good morning to everyone. Now I would like to give you the overview of the financial performance of Tallinna Vesi in the first quarter of 2016. I will start with the financial highlights and then will give more detailed overview about sales and costs. The performance of the group has been good. Total sales revenue were 5.9% or 0.8 million euros higher than in the first quarter of 2015. The sales of water and wastewater services increased by 2.1% or 0.3 million euros year-on-year. It was accompanied by increase in construction and asphalting services revenue, which have increased by 0.4 million euros compared to the first quarter of 2015. Compared to the first quarter of 2015, also the stormwater revenues were up by 12% or 0.1 million euros. The gross profit in the first quarter of 2016 has been higher by 3.3% or 0.3 million euros compared to the same period in 2015. The gross profit has been impacted by higher main services revenues, but moreover with higher construction services revenues, which were balanced by higher construction services costs and increased staff costs. The operating profit has been lower by 0.8% or 0.1 million euros than in the first quarter of 2015. The operating profit has been impacted by earlier mentioned higher gross profit, which has been balanced by higher administrative costs. Compared to the first quarter of 2015, the net profit of the company has been 11.7% or 0.7 million euros lower. Net financial expenses were influenced mainly by the negative change in the fair value of swap contracts. Now let's move on to the next slides, and I will comment on the changes of the revenues and expenses a bit closer. Let's start from the sales. As mentioned before, total sales revenues for the first quarter of 2016 have increased 5.9% year-on-year. Total revenues from water and wastewater services were by 2.1% or 0.3 million euros higher than in the first quarter of 2015, amounting to 12.5 million euros. As we are operating with the frozen tariffs since 2010, the change in revenues is solely driven by consumption. In the first quarter of 2016, we can see an increase in inside area water and wastewater revenues, which was partly offset by a decrease in outside area water and wastewater revenues. In the first quarter, the domestic consumption from Tallinn increased by 3% or 212,000 cubic meters, amounting to 7.33 million cubic meters, and the consumption of commercial sector increased by 4.6% or 107,000 cubic meters, amounting to 2.44 million cubic meters. There has been an increase in all residential customer groups. The biggest increase, or 63% from the total increase in domestic customer volumes, comes from apartment blocks, which is also our biggest customer group. In commercial sector, the growth comes from different sectors. Total volumes from outside areas have decreased by 18.2% or 346,000 cubic meters compared to the comparative period in 2015. It is mainly related to the sales to Viimsi, as they started to use the new wastewater treatment facilities at the end of 2015. As mentioned before, in the first quarter of 2016, there has been also an increase in construction and asphalting services revenues by 121.2% or 0.4 million euros. It was mainly related to higher pipe construction revenues from a big project which was started at the end of 2015. This now takes us to the overview of costs. The company's underlying operating performance in the first quarter has been good. The total cost of goods sold in the first quarter of 2016 have increased by 9.8% or 0.5 million euros compared to the same period in 2015. Direct production costs were 1.2% or 0.02 million euros higher than in the first quarter of 2015. The increase in direct production costs came from higher pollution tax expenses, which were balanced by savings in chemicals and electricity costs. High pollution tax expenses in itself were mainly related to 9.3% higher treated wastewater volumes, which had an impact of 0.03 million euros. Chemicals costs were lower as methanol price has been 20.5% lower than last year, which was balanced by higher use of methanol to remove nitrogen from wastewater. Electricity costs were lower because of lower electricity prices, and at the same time they were balanced by higher consumption per treated water in both treatment processes and higher treated volumes. Staff costs have increased in the first quarter both in costs of goods sold as well as in administrative due to the high average headcount and the increase in salaries compared to 2015. High average number of staff is related to providing more efficient and broader range of in-source services. Construction, design and asphalting services costs have increased by 19.2% or 0.4 million euros in the first quarter of 2016, which is related to higher construction services revenues mentioned earlier. Increase in administrative costs is mostly affected by increase in dispute-related legal costs and in earlier mentioned staff costs. Legal costs will continue to affect the administrative costs up to the end of both local and international disputes, the amount of which is dependent on work that needs to be put into both disputes. Net financial expenses have mostly been affected by the non-monetary revaluation of the fair value of the swap, having a negative net expense of 1.07 million euros year-on-year, offset by lower interest costs. If we would now move on cash flows. The cash position as of 31st of March 2016 is strong. The company's cash balance stood at 44.2 million euros, forming 20.5% of the total assets. Compared to the end of first quarter of 2015, the cash balance has decreased by 2.2 million euros. The biggest contribution to the cash flows comes from the main operations. The company's collection of receivables continues to be very strong, being 99.8% on average. In the 3 months of 2016, net cash flows from investing activities resulted in a cash outflow of 2.05 million euros. The money paid for the fixed assets has been showing a slight increase of 0.38 million euros compared to the comparative period in 2015, amounting to 2.24 million euros. The compensation received from pipelines decreased by 2.14 million euros compared to the 2015, amounting to 0.15 million euros. Decrease is mainly related to the collection for extension program, which was finished at the end of the first quarter in 2015. Financing cash flows are affected by the reduction in interest payments by 0.36 million euros and are related to the renewal of swap contracts early years. As already mentioned earlier in our announcement today, the Supervisory Council approved the proposal for dividends for annual general meeting of shareholders, which will be held on the 2nd of June 2016. Supervisory Council proposes to retain dividend at the same level as last year, which means to be paid out 90 cents per A share and 600 euros per B share. The payout is in line with our dividend policy of the company, which is reviewed regularly. The company is considering looking into it. Thank you for your time and attention, and all your questions are now welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Riina. You can now start asking questions if you have some. We will give it some time. Do you have an estimate about legal costs in 2016 and 2017? The question I will give to Riina, probably.
As mentioned before, they are being affected by the number of hours our lawyers are putting into this process. The only thing I can say here is that the exit will be finished in 2016 November, when the final hearing will be held. It will be held in Paris. It is going according to our expectations and budgets, and most probably the local hearings will continue in 2017, which means that the legal costs will be slightly lower, as we don't have any further 2 parallel processes going on, but only one.
Thank you, Riina. Is there any more questions? We have one, thank you. Have you considered putting a cap on legal services? For example, the legal fees may be billed hourly, but will be limited. Thank you. Riina again.
There are different options how to kind of assign a contract or negotiate a contract. We do have our budget that we have agreed with our lawyers and advisors, and we are monitoring it, and its current costs are going according to those estimations. Putting a cap into the legal costs, it also includes different risks that are written in, and it doesn't mean that the legal costs will be necessarily lower.
Thank you. Any more questions? At the moment, it seems like there is no further questions, but of course you can send them through later on via email. We would like to thank you for participation and see you in next quarter.
Thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. There is one question. What kind of settlement would Tallinna Vesi agree on, and how much it would affect the tariffs? Thank you.
When we are talking about settlement, then settlement has got, again, different options, and it's about negotiations. As far as it was mentioned earlier on, we haven't managed to even get to the proper phase when I could comment how it would affect. Definitely, our main purpose would pretty much reach to a reasonable settlement that would satisfy us as a company, a government, and also our clients. So the purpose wouldn't be to put up prices up as high as possible. No way. It would be a reasonable settlement that we are seeking here. The amount of which is too early to say, because it's a speculation, and we haven't had this proper negotiations and proper discussions so far.
Just to reinforce what Riina is saying, the problem has actually been engaging people for a meaningful discussion. So we've not actually got to the point where we've actually been negotiating regarding the settlement, because so far we've not been able to have the discussions.
We have one question more. When are dividends planned to pay out, and when is the dividends received list locked? Receivers list locked. Riina will take this.
The dividend receivers list should be locked by heart. I might be slightly mistaken, and it will be announced next week anyway, but it's either 15th or 16th of June, and the payout should take place after approximately 10 days, which is 26th of June.
Thank you. If there's any more questions, you may raise them. We will give it some more time. At the moment, it seems quiet. So we will try to end this once more. Okay. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I also want to thank you, as we had so many participants today, so I thank you very much.
Still, still one more to go. Asking about deadline for Tihase collector repair measures. Karl will take this.
Yes, I mean, the original deadline was October of last year. I think I've already talked on previous webinars about the technical challenge of doing the repair in the area of Scrutiny Beach and the land in which we're working. The current scheduled deadline is for June this year. However, we still have some more parts of the collector to survey to ascertain if there's any damage. So the current estimate is June, and that could be extended if we find any other damage in the area. But what we are doing throughout the works is maintaining public access to the beach. So hopefully the population of Tallinn will not be adversely affected by the works. The other thing to remember is that the costs are in line with the budget that we've talked to you about previously.
Thank you. I will keep some time. At the moment it seems like we have no more questions, but I will give it a minute probably. This time it seems like there is no more questions for the first time. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.